Now, last week we heard about Abraham and Sarah and the birth of their son. Do you remember his name? Anyone? Isaac, very good. And what does Isaac mean? Laughter, that's right. Well, our story today goes from that story and then fast forward several years. Baby Isaac has grown up, he's gotten married, and he's had twin boys, Esau and Jacob. And today we're looking at the story of Jacob. Now, although Jacob and Esau were twins, they were not like Fred and George Weasley kind of twins. No, this is more like a soap opera where there's that twin and then there's the evil twin, right? And in this case, the evil twin in this pairing is Jacob. These two were at odds from the very beginning. They were born wrestling. And then Jacob did the unthinkable, as evil twins do. He played a nasty trick and wrestled the birthright and blessing away from his brother Esau. So you could say Jacob was a wrestler from way back, even before this moment we read about today, where Jacob wrestles with God. Now, I do not follow wrestling very much, particularly high school wrestling, but in 2009, a story about two high school wrestlers caught my attention. Leroy Sutton and D'Artagnan Crockett were high school wrestlers in Cleveland, and they were both powerful wrestlers, and they found their match in one another. And D'Artagnan describes their first drills together as more competition than he expected. Of Leroy, he says, "He was a complete powerhouse. I never wrestled anyone as strong as him. We pushed each other to our limits, and we did not let each other give up." And while they had become opponents in the ring, they became fast friends outside the gym. And neither of them could really pinpoint how that friendship started, but there was one day where D'Artagnan gave Leroy a piggyback ride, and that solidified their friendship. From that point on, D'Artagnan would carry Leroy on his back everywhere, because Leroy needed to be carried around. He had no legs. He was not just a wrestler on the mat, he was a wrestler every day of his life. Leroy had to navigate and wrestle his way around a school that did not have an elevator for him. He had to wrestle his way onto buses without any wheelchair lifts. And he had to wrestle as he cared for himself and his younger sister because his parents were not able to parent. And on top of all of that, he wrestled with how he could hold on to his passion and his gift of wrestling. Jacob, in our Bible story today, had been wrestling his whole life too, with his brother mostly, but also with his uncle Laban. And it is in fact because of all of that wrestling that Jacob finds himself in his current situation. Unable to stay with Laban any longer, Jacob makes this long trek back home to face his brother. And you can bet he is afraid. He is sure his brother is going to make him pay for all the things he did to him. So here's Jacob, alone in the middle of nowhere, preparing to face his comeuppance. And he's dreading it. He's imagining that worst-case scenario, and because of that, he has pushed away all the people that he loves. He's pushed away his wives, his 11 kids, everything he owns, and he is sitting there by himself in the dark, waiting. Now, I don't know if you have ever been there too, sitting on your own, isolated, waiting for the worst to come. Maybe because of how you treated your siblings, your parents, your kids, your spouse. I don't know if you know the sound of an empty house. I don't know if you have felt that anxious hopelessness that seems like it is going to swallow you up whole. My guess is, in the very least, you do know what it's like to wrestle. To wrestle with yourself and the mistakes that you've made. To wrestle with the voices in your head that tell you you will never be good enough. To wrestle with loved ones that you chose or didn't choose to be in relationship with. To wrestle with God for all of the pain and suffering in the world. Wrestling is uncomfortable. I'd rather not do it. I would rather pretend that I have never made a mistake in my life and I've never hurt anyone's feelings. I would rather push people away than learn how to love them or accept the fact that they might never change. Some days I would rather forget about God than wrestle with my faith. Because really wrestling with the way that things are, well, it will mess up your perfect hairdo. And you will probably come out on the other side worse for the wear. But wrestling is better than numbing. And numbing is what you do when you cannot stand the wrestling, when you reach for that quick fix. But numbing does not take away the problem, it only adds to it. It takes a lot of courage to wrestle, to face the shadows. It takes a lot of patience and self-assurance to sit in isolation, to endure the fight. The month and a half that Leroy, that high school wrestler without his legs, that time that he spent in the hospital took a lot of courage. He says he wrestled the whole time he was in there asking, why? Why? Surely he thought his life was over. But little by little, his determination grew and he built up his strength. And then, of course, he met D'Artagnan. And I should mention here that D'Artagnan was no stranger to struggle as well. His mother died when he was 8 and left him spending a good portion of his teenage years homeless. D'Artagnan is also blind. Yet he notes God's presence with him throughout all those struggles. And instead of letting the struggles he faced in his life leave him for broken, he says they made him into the person that he is. And this, I think, is an essential part of Jacob's story too, because his wrestling makes him into a new person. He wrestled so intensely that he was put out of joint and he walked with a limp for the rest of his life. So yes, he is wounded. Yes, D'Artagnan is blind. Yes, Leroy lost his legs, but that does not keep any of them down. D'Artagnan gives Leroy piggyback rides. And Leroy helps D'Artagnan see. And they carry each other through it all. They keep on fighting because they know that they are blessed. Now, we have all gone through our own wrestling matches. We all have our own scars and walk with a little limp. I don't believe God causes any of that to happen, but I do believe that God is there in the loneliest and in the darkest of nights, wrestling with us, so we don't have to struggle alone. And I wonder what it was that Jacob so desperately wrestled for. He spent his whole life wrestling, fighting, tricking, working, deceiving, all because he wanted to be blessed, to be loved. And I wonder how many of our wounds are really our hearts aching for a blessing. How many of our limps are from the weight that we have placed on our own shoulders every time that we have believed to ourselves to be unlovable? Like Jacob, don't we all just want to be seen by God for who we are and to be told that that is enough? Well, God did see Jacob that night. Jacob without any tricks. And God blesses him. And God sees you too. God sees you with no Instagram filter, with your hair down and makeup off. God sees you when you are tired, when you are scared, when you're alone. And God blesses you. God sees the pain that you have been through, the pain that you are going through, and God is at your side as you wrestle through it. And maybe even when you need it most, God will give you a piggyback ride too. Because God does not let us go. Through the struggle, through those long nights, until the dawn breaks and a new day comes. And Jesus reminds us of this when he says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are you for whatever you are wrestling with." The kingdom of God is yours.